beautiful Bibles, and they even translated the Bibles into Chinese. And they were reading from the book of Revelation. They had made it all the way through, all the way to the end. And they really felt that these poor Chinese people were getting the groove. And they got to the book of Revelation, and they were talking about the struggle between the lamb and the dragon. And a strange thing happened. Suddenly all these Chinese people were supporting the dragon. And they were cheering on for the dragon when he defeats, or almost defeats, the lamb. And the people were like, what? Because in their culture, dragons are mythical beasts that set you free from evil. So obviously this lamb must be evil because it's fighting the dragon. Culture. The same thing happened this morning during the sermon. We had a beautiful example about a purple cow for the people who were there. And the preacher, he said, imagine if you're driving along in a field and you see a purple cow. What would you do? And there were a group of us Dutch people there, and we all thought, well, nothing, we just ignore it. You know why? We have hundreds of purple cows in Holland. We really do. And the slogan is, the best cows are milker cows, which are clearly purple. And if you see a purple cow and you feel, oh, it's another one of those adverts, and you just keep driving. So in Holland, we'd have to maybe have a pink cow or something, you know? A rainbow cow. Culture interprets communication. But you don't have to be Chinese and you don't have to be Dutch to do it. We all do it. And I think with one example from the Bible will give us a bit of a feeling for what I'm talking about. This is from Luke, I think it's chapter 12 or chapter 13. And it says there, at that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, Jesus, get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you. And Jesus said to them, go and tell that fox. And he says something snide. So basically what Jesus is saying here is Herod was a fox. Now what does that mean? I suppose we could interpret this literally. That Herod was not human but a real living fox, you know? It came out of the mouth of Jesus. Jesus would not tell a lie, so it must be literally too. It's in the Bible. Everything in the Bible is literal. So Herod was this anthropomized fox, with a crown, obviously, ruling over these Jews, kind of like Disney's Robin Hood, but then with a fox in charge instead of the lion. Is there anyone here who thinks that's what Jesus meant? Don't be shy. You might be right. My wife thinks that's what the case is. It's wonderful having you here. So we all pretty much agree it must be metaphorical. And then what we generally think is, well, you know what he must be? He must be sneaky like a fox. You know, like one of those grand viziers, you know, the people who do this and say, excellent. You know the people, right? He must be sneaky because foxes are sneaky. They're untrustworthy. They're slippery as a devil. They try to trick you with words. Because in English and also in Dutch, and maybe in the languages where you come from, a fox is a metaphor for a sneaky person. But that's wrong. It's totally 100% incorrect interpretation of this text. Because we know what a fox meant in that culture, and it was not a sneaky person. It was something else. And don't get shocked when you see what it is. A playboy. A ladies' man. A Don Juan, a womanizer, you know? Someone who likes short skirts and he cannot lie. That's what a fox is, and that is what Jesus is saying Herod is. He liked foxtails, it makes perfect sense, and he was a total fox. But we, in our culture, automatically assume, oh, he must be a sneaky person. At least that's what I often hear. I even read it in one of the English Bibles. Jesus said unto them, till that sneaky fox. Should actually say, till that womanizing fox. Culture interprets communication. And I can give you 100 more examples like that. I'm married to an American, and we had a very interesting couple of first years. When she would say words like fanny pack, napkin, pants, pissed, bangs, knob. And I was like, ooh. And she means something totally different. And it worked totally the other way around because there's a board somewhere around here that says humps for 5 miles, and she still thinks that's hilarious. Culture interprets communication. Now that we've established that, we need to ask ourselves, what is culture? What is culture? Well, we kind of have an idea what culture is. We can all kind of think something up. But A good way to start thinking what is culture is just to quickly look up it in the dictionary. We don't have a dictionary here, so I have it on my PowerPoint. And it gives us some clarity. Culture is the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. The arts and other manifestations of human intellect regarded collectively. So something about all the smart and pretty things that the really talented people make. Painters and writers and computer scientists and stuff like that. Or, that's one. Dictionary always has multiple interpretations. The second one is the ideas and customs and social behavior of a particular people or society. So basically there's two things that culture is, and I've put them here in English instead of dictionary speak. The one is something about how intellectuals interpret everything. Something about how smart people think about the world and stuff. But then at the same time, there's something about how the rest of us experience everything. So two sides, what the intellectuals think about everything and how we experience everything. And these two sides will come back later, so try to remember them in your mind, maybe one hand and the other, intellectuals and common people. Because if we talk about contemporary culture, about current culture, there's one word that we often hear, especially in the church. Postmodernism. Postmodernism, postmodernism everywhere. Or others like it. Postmodern, postmodernity, postmodernist. And in the church it's becoming a bit of an overused buzzword. It really is. We use it as some kind of catch-all for all contemporary culture. We teach classes on it, even here at Newbold. There's a master's class on postmodernity. We have an institute for ministry to postmoderns at the TED. We really go for these postmoderns, and I really don't like it. In all honesty, Kirsten did ask me to speak today about understanding postmoderns, and I told her, well, let's do something else. And she said, okay, Tom, because I like you. I don't know why. And she said, I can cut out postmoderns and put in contemporary culture, and that's what we're doing. Maybe it's a pet peeve, and maybe I'm just wrong, but I think we overuse postmodern a bit much. But I will like to talk about it because it is important to get where we're going. By the way, cool people call postmodern POMO. Just use it. And people are like, what's that? You can say it's postmodern. And they're like, oh. So we'll look at this postmodern, and it's a good step. But to do that, we're going to have to all rewind our minds to 1900. Go back to 1900. It's the end of the 18th century. Oh, sorry, it's not the end of the 19th century. In the 18th century, we had the Enlightenment with those French guys discovering Greek philosophy and thinking up all these great things like freedom and democracy and other things, I suppose. And fonts. They made up fonts as well. That's the other thing I know about the Enlightenment. And then we had, especially here in England, the Industrial Revolution. In Europe, we had also Industrial Revolution, but we also had this idea of nation-states and nationalism growing at the same time. England just finished their Victorian age. Europe didn't have Queen V, so we just finished our 19th century. And in the last couple of years, we've had some great scientific advancement. Great. It's wonderful. We've had great new science discoveries. We've discovered all manner of things, and we've got this great optimism, and scientists are saying, well, you know what? Give it, I don't want to say 5 years, but let's say 10. Give it 10 years and we'll know everything. That's what people are saying back then in 1900. And these people have this huge optimism based on their technological advancement that things will get cool and great and wonderful because we have science. And they have this optimism and this belief in progress, from the caveman to a kind of superman. And actually, it's not progress with a small p, it's progress with a capital P, because mankind is moving forward. And there is ultimate progress. And this time period, at the beginning of the 20th century, is what we call the modern era. The modern era. And now this is where it's going to start getting confusing, and it'll get more and more confusing, and then I'll be done, and then we'll be done. Because when we talk about the modern era, we have three words that sound exactly the same but are totally, totally different. And we need to understand the differences so we don't sound like idiots. So here we go. One word is modern. We often use the word modern as something that's contemporary, but here we mean something else. We mean a state of affairs characterized by innovation and experimentation with certain kinds of distancing from the past. So what does that mean? It means I believe that because I have this innovation and this scientific experimentation, that what I am now is no longer what we used to be. There's a gap between the past and the now, because now we have science and now we're going somewhere and we're no longer what we used to be. This is an adjective. I put it behind there, it's an adjective. So it says something about a noun. So you can say it's a modern era, or a modern person, or a modern car, or a modern, etc., etc. But you also have a noun, modernity. And modernity is simply the sense, the idea that the present is discontinuous with the past. Same idea. So that there's a gap between the past and now, and that through a process of social and cultural change, what I like to call progress with a capital P, life in the present is fundamentally different from life in the past. So that is a belief that we are fundamentally better than we used to be, thanks to this wonderful thing that we have called science or intellect or the modern age. Now this is what I'd like to call a plebeian movement. It's the people, gardeners and bus drivers. I don't know if they had bus drivers in 1900. Probably, right? Anyone know? Yes, great. It's the people in the field, the workers who are this. They stand in complete contrast to the third word, which is modernism or modernist. And this is certain trends in art, writing, criticism, philosophy. These are thinkers and artists and intellectuals, and these people have a powerful influence on the development and experience of the 20th century. This is an intellectual movement, a movement among the intelligentsia of the time, and it stands in contrast to what is happening amongst the people. It's the same kind of movement, they're very similar, but the ones experiencing it and the other ones doing it. Now, to remember what the difference is, I've thought up a mnemonic device. In Dutch, we call it an ezelsbruggetje, which means a donkey bridge. I don't know why, but it's a lot easier to say than mnemonic. But mnemonic device, it's very easy. The word has an S in it, it's for scholars. So postmodernism, it's got a S in it, so it's for scholars. And modern doesn't have a S, so it's not for scholars, it's for the people. Why am I telling you this? Because people often get this wrong, especially when we get to postmodernity later. So modern, no S, simple. Modernism, yes and S, scholar. Now these top two describe culture, people, the laity. And the bottom one describes the arts and the intellectuals. And when we look back at how I defined culture earlier, I said we have two hands. The one hand is something about how intellectuals interpret everything, and the other hand is how people experience everything. This is modern, this is modernism. It's very different. Having gone through those terms, let's return to modernity and the modern optimism. This idea of progress. They have this idea that because of our knowledge of basically everything, we will achieve utopia on Earth within our generation. This is what people really, really expected. They did not think it was some kind of future thing that would happen to future generations. They thought we now will achieve peace and utopia and a perfect society within a couple of years. A perfect, wonderful society thanks to technology with a capital T and science with a capital S. But instead of utopia, you know what they got? This. Armageddon, seriously. An entire generation died in the trenches of World War I. And then just to make sure that no one thought that might have just been a minor hiccup on the way to utopia, we got the Second World War, where we threw in some extra genocide as well in Europe. And what did this do? This dashed the dreams of the people. It hazed their hopes. They expected utopia and they got Armageddon. And this was a greater disappointment than the Great Disappointment. People realized that what they were hoping for was not going to happen. They realized progress with a capital P does not exist. Because clearly it didn't happen. We got something worse than what we had before with science, because with science we could kill each other even better. It's terrible. So all these modernist ideas with the capital letters, they died in the first half of the 20th century. And the entire society stopped believing in what I like to call big pictures. Big pictures like progress, or science, or advancement. No one believed in them anymore. But it got even worse, because people realized something. They realized that people in power use big pictures to oppress the normal man. What do I mean? Nationalism, the idea that you are a Dutchman in my case, is used by my government to get me to fight for my own country and do what they want me to do. They use ideas of, together we can do it, to get you to work in a factory for 20 hours a day. The powers that be paint big pictures, and sometimes there are very pretty pictures of people smoking pipes. They paint big pictures so that they can use and abuse you. The church did it throughout the Middle Ages, but once the church lost its power, the governments took over. So these people not only stopped believing in big pictures, they became distrustful of anyone who painted one. Because if you have a big picture, you must be evil because you're painting it to abuse me. And we call these big pictures grand narratives of meta-narratives. Terms aren't important in this case. Big pictures work fine. But it got even worse because they didn't like truth either. Truth claims. Ain't nobody got time for that. Because not only do powers use big pictures, they also use truth claims. They say this is how it is and it's not anything else, and they use that claim about the truth to make sure that you do what they want you to do. The church tells you the only way to get into heaven is if you buy these things from us so that they can get your money and abuse you. So not only were the meta-narratives out the window, but so was truth. And this is what, in about 1970, a French sociologist described as the postmodern condition. Society had moved past that idea of modernity with all the progress and the advancements, and it hit something new called postmodernity. Postmodern and postmodernity. Because this was a sociologist talking about the people in his country. Not intellectuals, not artists, but the people were postmodern. That is what he saw back then. And at the same time, it spawned certain intellectuals, especially in the 80s, that we had a lot of postmodernist philosophers who wrote about postmodernism, which is totally incomprehensible unless you spent many, many years studying it. But they got around to talking about it. But we already had those postmodernist people in the 1970s. Now, a little gripe from me. I couldn't stop doing it. A word I often hear in the church is postmoderns. And to give you an example, I have a pair of hiking shoes. You can see them up the top. They're German. They're Meindl. And I don't know if you can read it from there, but it says Meindl, and underneath the logo it says, for actives. And whenever I see it, I think, oh, those Germans, they try so hard, but they're never really good at English. The Dutch aren't good either, but I'm fortunately South African, and we speak the best English in the world. And then I hear someone saying, well, you know what, I minister to postmoderns. And exactly the same thing. It's like saying shoes for actives. It just doesn't work. It doesn't help. You mean well, but just try to say for postmodern people. Finish the sentence and you sound a lot smarter. So sorry, I had to just put it in, sorry. But anyway, postmodernism, this is a very famous picture. One does not simply define postmodernism, but I tried to give it a go. Non-belief in meta-narratives, no more utopian pictures of something that is coming that is better than now, total distrust of anyone who's saying, I know the truth. And then there's this fragmentation of everything. It comes from this rejection of truth that you have this idea of, I can break everything up into small parts and I can pick the little part I like. For me, something might be true, for you, something not. Fragmentation. And that is, in essence, in a very, very short time, postmodernism, or POMO, as the cool people call it. Now, maybe you've heard that before. Now, the problem with postmodernism is this. My dad is postmodern, but I'm something altogether. My dad's 73. He's postmodern. He was the people that Lyotard, the French sociologist in 1970, was discussing. That was 44 years ago. I was -9. Yes, my parents hadn't even got married yet, let alone thought about having me or trying and having me. You know, I was a dream, but we still say the young people are postmodern. Yeah, that's the problem. Postmodernism is something that's been around for a long, long time, and we really need to start thinking about what comes next. Now, the reason we get confused is because in the church, we're generally less postmodern than outside the church. I say my dad is postmodern, but he's a little bit postmodern, but he's also very Adventist. And those things don't mix very well always. Because as Adventists, we love truth, right? My grandmother used to tell my brother's friends at the dinner table about the truth and ask them if they're ready to join it. She would also tell them about the prophecies over the soup. Yes, it was interesting growing up in South Africa. And we love truth. We love these meta-narratives of a great utopia, and that has made us as a church less postmodern than the people outside the church, normalizing tendencies of the group. But that doesn't mean that we as a church, including the somewhat elderly people, are all influenced by the postmodern condition that is outside the church. And what we do is we think we're not postmodern, and then we start postmodern ministries with postmodern sermons and postmodern videos and postmodern postcards or flyers. But you know what postmodern people call a postmodern sermon? A sermon. It's just a sermon. There's nothing wrong with the sermon, it's just that you have to say things that people are interested in. But we seem to think, well, we have to reinvent all the rules because everyone is postmodern, but most of us in here are also postmodern. We're not ministering to postmodern people that are this mythical beast outside the church. We're ministering to the culture around us, including ourselves. We are ministering to the people in need. But I digress. Because I said my dad is postmodern and I'm something else altogether. What am I? What is the cultural landscape like now? Well, time has moved since 1970 and culture has changed. And here are some of the buzzwords that you'll hear in modern sociology or literary studies. Metamodernism, post-humanism, neo-modernism, new materialism. Now, the cool thing about these things is I've tried to read up on them, and you kind of get a feeling for what's going on, but I think the people don't actually know what's going on either, so it's a bit vague. My wife disagrees horribly with me. She thinks these things are very, very clear, and then she explains to them, and it's just like... But I'll try to give you, in short, a bit of an idea about what's going on among the somewhat younger generations. Metamodernism. Now, metamodernism is a reaction to postmodernism that allows for cynicism and hope in one worldview. Bend your mind around that. Postmodernism said that hope for a utopia, that's bad news because it's never going to happen. So that was cynicism. Now, these metamodernist people have said, yes, well, it's true, but actually I kind of like having that idea of a utopia, so I'm going to have both. Both cynicism, I don't believe in these utopias, but I also believe in one. It's kind of hard, but I think many young Adventists are like that. We are very cynical, to these utopian ideas, but we all do kind of believe in heaven and want to go there one day. But we struggle with it. Another one is post-humanism. That's a reaction to, I think, humanism, which is the idea that you can have a unified example of humanity. All humans are based on, say, the white European male. That's often the standard human that is taken. And post-humanists are saying, well, that's not true. You can't define humanity by taking one standard person and just copying it for everyone. We're all unique, we're all different. So trying to cope with that, and also the idea of what we have like technological limbs, and our bodies are changing, because if you can't see anymore, you don't even have to wear glasses, you can get LASIK, whatever you call that thing. Surgery, thank you. I was going to say therapy, but I thought that's not going to work, is it? Well, how do you feel about you not being able to see? Well, it makes me very hurtful inside, you know. We're seeing that our bodies are changing thanks to technological advancements, and what is human is no longer so clear, because a human could have a mechanical arm or a mechanical eye, and he would still be human, but it wouldn't look very human, or she would also be human. I suppose I should use she more often. So combining those technological advancements with this idea that we distrust having one general human person, we get this idea of post-humanism, and they do this in a very complicated and incomprehensible way. Trust me. The other one is neo-modernism, and neo-modernism is kind of cool, because neo-modernism says, I reject some of the ideas of postmodernism. Because the problem with postmodernism is saying that we can each have our own truth. So let's take a very radical example. My truth is killing children. I really like it, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. Does anyone think my truth is valid here? No. Not really, right? So what we're saying is us as human have certain basic human rights that we want to keep. Like we don't want to let random people, especially pastors, kill young children. So to protect the rights, the basic human rights of people, we can't let this whole idea of everyone having their own truth go too far, because those two don't balance. So we want to have the idea of human equality, but we also want to have this idea of certain amount of freedom with regards to truth. Well, those two things are very hard to combine, and thus neo-modernism was born. And I think that many Christians are not very postmodern and slightly more modernist about that. And then we have new materialism, and new materialism is also fun, because that is the fundamental belief that the metaphysical and the physical are intertwined. The metaphysical and the physical are intertwined. Postmodernism says pretty much everything is a social construct. The fact that I call myself a man is a social construct. What that means to be a man, how I act as a man, that's nothing got to do with who I actually am. That has been ingrained into me by my culture. If I'd grown up in a different culture, I would be a totally different person, because idea of male might be very different in a different culture, maybe not an earthly culture, but another culture, but it would be totally, totally different. So ideas of gender, according to postmodernists, is totally based on the culture in which we grew up in. And then you have the smart aleck new materialism person who says, yes, that may be true, but no matter what, a male like you has a penis. What does that mean? The metaphysical idea of gender is always linked in some way to my sexual organs. There's the physical, i.e., maybe I shouldn't have taken sexual organs as an example now while I'm talking about it. Feel a bit uncomfortable talking about penises from the stage, but hey. It is a good example, let's just bear with it. The idea that I have certain physical aspects of being a male is linked to my idea of gender that I have as a postmodern person. You can't totally separate those two. So we're throwing away a bit of postmodernism and putting in a bit of modernism and materialism in there. Now these are just a few, and actually I could have written maybe 10 or 20 or 40 of these, but this is already very hard to understand, but it was just a taster of what's going on in culture. And some of these, as we saw, they break down fundamental tenets of postmodernism. They're going back to pre-postmodern things, so modernist ideas, and others are radicalizing it and making it even stronger and saying, well, postmodernists, you didn't go far enough, you have to make it even stronger and go more. And they're all arguing with each other, and that is the culture to which we are ministering right now. It's very, very complex, very, very complicated. And this postmodern person out there to which we minister, they don't exist. We have people that are very, very different. And as we heard this morning, we need to communicate to each person individually. I forget exactly what wonderful soundbite you had for that, but same idea, same idea. So what we are doing, and that we can take, is that we are communicating not per se to a postmodern world, but to a world in which postmodernism has happened. Same as we living in a world where sin has happened, and we're now paying the price. We're living in a world where postmodernism happened, and we're paying the price for that. I think it's a good price, but maybe it's a reward. Anyway, so what does that mean for us as Adventists? Because Adventism, and that's the big problem, we are known as a modern and a modernist religion. We are really, really big on meta-narrative and truth. Even now, what do we want to do to reach the world? We want to hand out a book consisting of one big meta-narrative, the Great Controversy. That is what we are handing out. And we say, well, this meta-narrative, well, that's the truth. That is what we do, because that's how we think as Adventists. And we always say we have the truth about the state of the dead, or the Sabbath, or the end times, etc. And this is a huge challenge for the church, because the problem is not the gospel. The problem is the source that we've put on top of the stake of the gospel. And what happened is, the gospel's great, and it's lovely, and it's wonderful. Jesus loves you, no one disagrees with that. But we've put this Adventist source on top of it, and we've become so attached to the source that we don't really like the steak anymore underneath it. Well, it's meat, obviously, so we shouldn't be eating it anyway. All right? And what you see is Adventism grows very fast in modern areas. We grew previously in Europe and America very fast. Now we're growing fast in other modern areas of the world. But in places where postmodernity has grabbed hold, we don't grow as fast because our source isn't that delicious for the people around us. And this is hard because that Adventist source has actually become Adventism over the years. That is what we are. We identify ourselves to our source and not to the meat of the gospel. And it's strange because our pioneers, they believed in searching for the truth. Individually searching for the truth, discussing it as a group, and finding the truth in the Bible. Searching for the truth. And we still believe this, but we don't practice it. We don't let people search anymore. We tell them what the truth is. We show them. We teach them. The problem is, we know people have questions, and then we say, well, I have the answers. And we give them the answers. But that is the wrong way with dealing with contemporary people. People have questions, and then we think, oh, we should give them answers in our sermons. People have questions, so we say we should give them answers in our Bible studies. And that is just the wrong way of dealing with people nowadays. Actually, it never was the right way of dealing with it, because Jesus doesn't do that either. How many times does Jesus answer a question? A straight answer, like yes or no. If you can find it, I'd be very pleased to hear about it. But how it generally goes is someone comes to Jesus and says, well, Jesus, could you tell me who this neighbor person is I must love? And Jesus says, I'll tell you a very complicated story. And it's going to be quite long. And there'll be multiple characters. And at the end of the story, I'll ask you this question. And then maybe you'll know. It's sometimes a bit infuriating, but it's a great way to let people find out the truth for themselves. Because an answer you heard is never as valuable as an answer you found. And that is why Jesus does it, and that is exactly what we can do too. That is what teachers did in biblical times. That is what rabbis did. They didn't answer questions. They led people to their own answers. And that is what we can do too. Now then, what does that mean? Very concrete. A few seconds. We need to assume that people don't want the truth, even though we know it's great. We need to assume that people don't want the great controversy, even though it's a great idea and a great read. We have to assume that people don't want our answers. They want our experiences. They want us to guide them to their own answers. They want fragments of their truth from us that they can add together so they can make their whole. And we have excellent fragments. We have health, we have rest, we have the Sabbath, we have Jesus, we have the sofa, we have forgiveness. But that means we need to connect with them, not with a health message, but with a great recipe. We need to connect with them, not with the cross, but with sharing how we deal with our own guilty feelings. We need to share our lives, our path, our answers, so that they can find their own path, their own life, and their own answers. And we really need to stop thinking that we know all the answers, all the paths, and all of life. Thank you.